Essay on Catholicism, Liberalism and Socialism, by Don Juan Donoso Cortez. Translated by Madeline Vinton Goddard. 1862. Notice: the dogmatical portion of this work has been examined by one of the most eminent theologians of Paris belonging to the glorious school of the Benedictines of Solesmes. In the final revision of this work the author has conformed to all his suggestions. Essay on Catholicism, Liberalism and Socialism. Book 2. Chapter 6. Before the creation of man, and in ages too remote for human investigations, God created the angels, blessed and perfect creatures, to whom it was given to dwell in the serene radiance of the beatific vision, bathed in an ocean of unspeakable delights and perpetual adoration. The angels were pure spirits, and their nature surpassed that of man, who was composed of an immortal soul, united to the dust of the earth. In the simplicity of his nature, the angel resembled God, while in his reasoning faculties, his liberty and his limited wisdom, he was in affinity with man. So man in his spiritual nature was conformed to the angel, and in his corporeal nature to physical things, which were placed in subjection to his will, and in obedience to his word, and all creatures were born with the inclination and the power to change their condition, and to ascend in that immense scale of being, which commencing in the lowest existences, terminates in that holy being who is above all, in whose incommunicable name, the heavens and the earth, men and angels adore. Physical nature aspired in a certain way to a spiritual condition, to a resemblance with man, and man sought a higher spirituality and a nearer resemblance to the angel, and the angel, a closer assimilation to that perfect being, who is the source of all life, the creator of all creatures, whose vastness none may measure, and whose immensity none may comprehend. All things had come forth from God, and were to reascend to God, as to their first principle and origin, and because all things were created by him, and were to return to him, so was there nothing that did not reflect with more or less brightness his beauty. In this way infinite diversity was reduced of itself, to that vast unity which created all things, and which established among them such a wonderful harmony and connection, separating those which were confused and uniting those which were disconnected. By this we see that the act of creation was complex, and composed of two different acts, that is the act by which God created what before had no existence, and the act by which he disposed all that he had created, according to his wisdom. By the first of these acts he revealed his power to create all substances, and by the second he revealed the power to create every form that embellishes these substances. And as there can be no other substance than that created by God, so there can be no beauty except that which he has given to things. For this reason the universe, which signifies everything created by God, is the combination of all substance and order, which signifies the form in which God has modeled all things, is the combination of all beauty. There exists no creator except God. There can be no beauty except in order, and no creature except in the universe. If all beauty consists in the order originally established by God, and if beauty, justice, and goodness are the same thing, viewed under different aspects, it follows from this that, outside of this order established by God, there can be neither beauty, justice, nor goodness. And if these three things constitute the supreme good, order which includes them all, must necessarily be the supreme good. As there is no good except in order, everything not in conformity with order must be evil, nor can there be any evil which does not consist in a subversion of order. Therefore, as order is the supreme good, disorder is the supreme evil, because outside of disorder there can be no evil, and outside of order no good. From what has been said, we deduce the inference that order, or what is the same thing, supreme good, consists in the preservation of all things, in that connection in which God placed them, when he created them out of nothing, and that disorder, or what is its equivalent, supreme evil, consists in breaking this admirable connection and this sublime harmony. This connection could not be broken, nor this harmony interrupted, except by the exercise of a will and power, which were to a certain point, and in a possible manner, independent of the will of God. No creature was endowed to such an extent, except angels and men, who were alone created in the image and likeness of their Maker, that is to say, intelligent and free. Consequently angels and men could alone be the cause of disorder, or what is its equivalent, supreme evil. Angels and men could not disturb the order of the universe without rebelling against God. Therefore, in order to explain the existence of evil and disorder, it is necessary to suppose the existence of rebellious angels and men. All disobedience and rebellion being what is called sin, and all sin being a rebellion and disobedience, it follows that we can neither conceive of disorder in creation, nor of evil in the world, without supposing the existence of sin. If sin consists in disobedience and rebellion, and if these are nothing but disorder, and disorder nothing but evil, then it follows that evil, disorder, rebellion, disobedience, and sin are absolutely identical, just as good, order, submission, and obedience are things presenting a perfect resemblance, whence we conclude that submission to the divine will is the supreme good, and sin the supreme evil. When all the angels were obedient to the voice of their Creator, viewing themselves in His divine countenance, rejoicing in His splendors, and moving with freedom and concerted harmony at His word, it came to pass that the most glorious among them forgot God in the contemplation of Himself, and remained enraptured in self-adoration, and ecstatic at beholding His own beauty, regarding Himself as self-subsistent, and as His own ultimate end. He violated that universal and sacred law, according to which all diversity must have its beginning, and its end in unity, which embracing all, without being embraced in anything, is the universal container of all created things, as the Creator is of all creatures. The rebellion of the angel was the first disorder, the first evil, and the first sin. It was the origin of all sin, of all the evil and all the disorder which was to fall upon creation, and especially upon the human race through subsequent ages. For when the fallen angel, who was now deprived of light and beauty, saw the man and woman in paradise, so pure, so lustrous, and so beautiful with the splendors of grace, he felt the deepest dejection at the sight of an excellence which he had lost, and instantly formed the design of involving them in his condemnation, since he could not equal them in glory, assuming the form of a serpent, which was to be forever the symbol of deceit and cunning, the horror of the human race, and an object of divine wrath. He entered the terrestrial paradise, and gliding through its tender and fragrant herbage, entangled the woman in that most subtle snare, by which she lost her innocence, and with it her happiness. Nothing can equal the sublime simplicity of the mosaical narration of this tragedy, of which the terrestrial paradise was the theater, God the spectator, and the actors, on the one side the king and sovereign of the abyss, and on the other the kings and sovereigns of the earth, of which mankind was to be the victim, while the sad and sorrowful catastrophe was to be lamented with everlasting sorrowing, by the earth in its motion, by the heavenly bodies in their revolutions, by the angels on their thrones, and by us, unhappy children of those unfortunate parents. In the darksome valley of our pilgrimage, the serpent commenced his discourse thus: "Why hath God commanded you that you should not eat of every tree of paradise?" And immediately the woman felt her heart inspired with that vain curiosity, which was the primal cause of her guilt. From that moment, her understanding, and her will, were enfeebled by the sweet temptation, and began to depart from the will of God and the divine mind. And the serpent said to the woman, "In what day soever you shall eat thereof, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Under the disastrous influence of this promise, the woman felt in her heart the first sensations of pride, and regarding herself with complacency, the face of God was at that moment withdrawn from her sight. Proud and vain, she cast her eyes upon the tree of infernal illusions and divine vengeance. She saw that it was beautiful, and inferred that its fruit must be pleasant to the taste, and felt enkindled in her senses the fire, till then unknown, of corrosive delights. Thus the curiosity of the eyes, and gratification of the flesh, and pride of the spirit combined, deprived the first woman of her innocence, and afterward corrupted the first man. Then the many treasured hopes for his posterity vanished, as smoke is dissipated in the ambient air. And then the entire universe was disturbed, and disorder, having commenced at the highest point of the scale of created beings, was communicated from one to the other, until everything was wrested from the course and place assigned to it by the sovereign Creator. The innate attraction of every creature, to ascend and remount even to the throne of God, was changed into an aspiration, to descend into some nameless abyss, for to turn away from God, was as it were, seeking for death and striving to get rid of life. However deep man may descend into the fathomless abyss of wisdom, however high he may mount in the investigation of the most hidden mysteries, yet he can never ascend so high nor descend so low, as to be able to comprehend the vast ravages inflicted by this first crime, and out of which all other calamities have arisen, as from a most prolific source. No, never can man, never can the sinner, conceive the magnitude and the deformity of sin, in order to understand how great, how terrible, and how devastating are its effects. We must examine it under the divine point of view, and not as measured by human standards. In the deity we find the supreme good, and in sin the supreme evil, the deity being order, and sin disorder, the deity a complete affirmation, and sin an absolute negation, the deity being plenitude of existence, and sin its absolute decline. There exists between God and sin, as between affirmation and negation, order and disorder, good and evil, existence and non-existence, an incommensurable distance, an invincible contradiction, and an infinite repugnance. No calamity, however overwhelming, can disturb the ineffable repose of the divinity. When the universal deluge overspread the earth, God beheld the tremendous inundation, considered in itself and separated from its cause, with a serene countenance, because the angels, obedient to his command, had opened the floodgates of heaven, and the waters, obedient to his voice, covered the mountains and encompassed the earth. The clouds, gathered from every corner of the obscured horizon, and united, hung as a black pall over the earth, yet the face of God remained serene, because it was his will that darkness should cover the earth, for he called the clouds and they came, he commanded them to unite, and they did so. It is he who sends the hurricane to desolate a guilty city, and he who in the fulfillment of his designs arrests the waters, restrains the thunderbolt within the cloud, or hurls it flashing through the air. His eyes have witnessed the rise and fall of every empire, his ears have heard the prayers of nations, laid waste by the sword of the conqueror, by pestilence, slavery, and famine, and he has remained tranquil and impassive, because it is he who holds as mere puppets in his hand the empires of the world. It is he who puts the sword in the hand of the conqueror. It is he who sends tyrants to rule over guilty nations. It is he who punishes unbelieving peoples with famine and pestilence, when his sovereign justice demands it. There is a frightful place, the abode of horror, fear, and suffering, where there is insatiable thirst, and perpetual hunger without relief, where no light ever gladdens the eyes, nor peaceful sounds reach the ear, where all is agitation without repose, weeping without intermission, and grief without consolation. There all may enter, but none may depart. Their hope dies, but memory is immortal. The limits of this place are known to God alone, and these torments are uninterrupted and endless in duration. Yet this cursed abode, with its inexpressible agonies, does not disturb the tranquility of God, because his omnipotence has so ordained it. God made hell for the reprobate, just as he made the earth for men, and heaven for angels and saints. Hell declares his justice, as the earth proclaims his goodness, and the heavens his mercy. Wars, inundations, plagues, conquests, famine, hell itself, are something good, because they are all ordained with regard to the ultimate end of creation, and they all serve as useful instruments of the divine justice, and because they are all useful, and have been made by the author of all good, none of them can alter the ineffable repose of the Creator of all things. Nothing is hateful to God but that which he has not made, and as he has created all that exists, nothing displeases him but the negation of what he has created. For this reason is it, that disorder, which is the negation of the order which he established, and disobedience, which is the denial of the obedience due to him, are hateful in his sight. This disobedience, this disorder, are the supreme evil, inasmuch as they are the negation of the supreme good, the supreme evil consisting in this negation. But disobedience and disorder are nothing else than sin, from which it follows that sin, being an absolute negation on the part of man, of the supreme affirmation on the part of God, is therefore the supreme evil, which alone strikes God and his angels with horror. Sin filled heaven with mourning, hell with lamentations, and the earth with calamities. It was sin which brought sickness, pestilence, famine, and death into the world. It was sin which caused the destruction of the most renowned and populous cities. It caused the downfall of Babylon and her splendid gardens. of Nineveh the proud, of Persepolis the daughter of the sun, of Memphis the seat of the most profound mysteries, of Sodom the impure, of Athens the witty, of Jerusalem the unfaithful, and of Rome the magnificent. For, if God ordained the destruction of all these cities, he only did so as a punishment and a remedy for sin. Sin has caused all the sighs that have agitated human breasts, and all the tears that have fallen, drop by drop, from the eyes of men, and what is much more than all, and beyond imagination to conceive, or words to express, it has caused tears to flow from the most sacred eyes of the Son of God, the meek Lamb, who suffered on the cross, for the sins of the world. Neither men, nor the earth, nor the heavens ever saw him laugh, but men, the earth, and the heavens saw him weep, and he wept at the contemplation of sin. He wept over the grave of Lazarus, but he only bewailed, in the death of his friend, the loss of the soul through sin. He wept over Jerusalem, but he wept for the abominable sins of a people who could commit a deicide. He was sad and agitated in the garden, but it was horror of sin, which there filled his soul with anguish, so that his brow sweat blood. At the dreadful spectacle, he was crucified, but it was sin which nailed him to the cross, and caused him to expire there in bitter agony.